Joining me now is newly announced candidate for president, Democratic Congressman from Minnesota, Dean Phillips. Congressman Phillips, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
So happy to be with you, Kristen.
So it is official. You are challenging President Biden for the Democratic presidential nomination. I want to ask you about why you're running. Is your run solely because of public perception about President Biden's fitness for office?
Kristen, I'm running because America is demanding it. About 80% of the country is making it very clear they want another choice. These are Democrats and Republicans. Over 50% of Democrats are asking for a different nominee. And thank goodness we live in a country of democracy, where competition, where the freedom to make choices and your vote matters. And having choices and having options is integral to democracy. And that's the answer. I'm answering that call right now. I'm listening to too many people, I have been for a long time, that want change, that want to pass that torch to a new generation. The problems that we are facing are ones that my generation and future generations can, should, and will attack. But we can't do it the old way, and we've got to do it together. We got to repair this nation literally and figuratively and get to work. And I'm going to make that case thoughtfully, gracefully, and with fortitude, because we are facing some significant challenges and an existential threat to the very democracy that we love so much.
Well, as some of President Biden's supporters have pointed out, you have voted with President Biden nearly 100% of the time while you were in Congress. So I guess the question is, do you have any major policy critiques about the Biden administration?
Well, Kristen, I admire the president. I voted for those policies because they're good ones, and they will be making a difference over time. I'm not running against Joe Biden. I'm not running against President Biden. I'm running for the future. Yes, we have some policy differences, but I'm a proud Democrat. And what I'm hearing every single day, and I know all of my colleagues are as well, both Democrats and Republicans, is that the cost of living in America is terrifying for people right now. It's too high. Things that were affordable are no longer. Mortgage rates are going up. Fuel is too expensive. Food is too expensive. People can't afford child care. And we're spending almost $1 trillion a year defending the very people who can barely make ends meet. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. About 40% cannot even afford a $400 emergency repair. And I'm afraid we have people protecting their positions of power instead of protecting the American people who are desperate for someone to listen to them. And if I can make that change, if I can be that ear and then that voice and then that president, that's how this system is supposed to work. And I might also say, those who might fear choice or who fear freedom, I don't think are on the side of democracy, and that is very troubling in a time like this.
Congressman, respectfully, you are literally running against President Biden. So can you tell voters what is your major point of difference with President Biden?
I'm not running against President Biden. I'm running for the majority of Americans who want somebody different.
But you just announced you're running for president, aren't you? That means you're running against President Biden. That's literally the definition of what that means.
And I'm doing it, and I'm running for president because America deserves to have someone listen to them. I am someone that feels so deeply that this system is so broken, is so corrupt, and is so in need of someone who does not come from 50 years of spending time in Washington, a culture of conflict instead of cooperation. I know what America wants. I'm part of the exhausted majority. I know tens of millions of people are as well. And I also want to make it clear, because I admire Joe Biden, I also am a proud Democrat. I would not run as an independent. In fact, I encourage all the third-party candidates to enter the primary. Cornel West, Robert Kennedy, the No Labels effort. I think that would be the most traumatic, dangerous decision possible. I want people to actually enter the primary because that's how we do it in America. And frankly, I'm still extending an invitation to more, because we need more contributions in our political lives. We need more competition, and we need more participation. That's why I'm doing this, and I'm doing it with joy, but also recognizing the existential threat to our country. Gun violence. 18 people were just killed in the state next door in Maine. 18 Americans. And because Americans in Congress are fighting one another, we're not fighting for the people we represent. I'm going to change that. I look forward to it. And if I don't succeed, rest assured I will be supporting the eventual Democratic nominee. But Americans are saying they want somebody else.
And we are going to talk about guns, but I just have to try one more time. Name one policy difference that you have with the current commander-in-chief, with President Biden.
I can name a couple. I think the circumstances at our southern border, which I visited twice, are a good example where I believe Democrats have not done the job. National security is important to me. As president, I will ensure it, and our southern border is part of that. We need a comprehensive reform package to ensure border security. We need immigration reform, and we should be bringing Democrats and Republicans together at the table to identify ways to use the hundreds of billions of dollars that we spend a year, much of it overseas, to actually keep people safe in the countries from which they're migrating so that we can go upstream and actually prevent the crisis that we are now dealing with. And frankly, Democratic and Republican administrations have been for years unsuccessfully. I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do it in a bipartisan fashion, and I'm going to get the job done because I'm sick of people making those promises who do not have the intention, in my estimation, of actually accomplishing it.
You talk about the border. How would you differ from President Biden? Because what you laid out sounds a lot like President Biden. Would you be more aggressive? Would you more aggressively, for example, build the wall? Would you be open to sending U.S. troops to the border? What would that look like under your administration?
Look, building a wall is like a medieval notion. It doesn't work. In some places, having barriers works. But we have the finest technology in the entire world right here in the United States. We have some of the finest human beings in the entire world right here in the United States. We should resource them appropriately. Our infrastructure at the border, for anybody who has been there, is embarrassing, and it's appalling, and we are better than that, and we should be investing better than that. I also believe, like I said, I think we should be spending our money overseas to keep the problem from occurring, not when it reaches our border, but before it gets to our border. You know, that's how we should do things in America. Instead, we tend to throw money at problems thinking it might solve something. We have to make a totally different look at it. We have to change the policies. And we've got to maintain the American brand of welcoming refugees, those who desire opportunity and liberty and freedom. That's who we are. And if we ever lose that, Kristen, then we are a failed nation. I will never let that happen. We can do both, and I'm tired of politicians on both sides of the aisle too regularly saying there's only one way or the other. The truth is, two things are often true at once. And until we have leadership in both the Congress and the White House that acknowledges that, we're not going to do better. And as long as Republicans think they can beat the country, or Democrats think they can beat the country, it's not going to work. We got to beat our problems by working together. It's as simple as that. And I've not seen that in the way that I believe we need and that I will bring.
Congressman, you raise border security. That's something, of course, that President Biden talks about. He's just, in fact, proposed new legislation that would enhance funding at the border. So be specific if you can. Where would you differ from President Biden on the border? Would you, for example, expand the border wall? Would you send troops to the border, as some of the Republican candidates have proposed? What would look different?
Well, Kristen, I come from the private sector. I spent much of my career in business before becoming a member of Congress. And the way we found solutions is to go upstream. And the way to do so in this case is not to simply address the issue once it reaches our border, rather address the issue before it gets there. I serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I'm the ranking member of the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia Subcommittee. I know how we're spending our dollars overseas, and I believe we can do so more effectively and more efficiently, including in the countries from which most of the migrants are leaving because they are unsafe. They want to find economic opportunity and security for their families, just like so many of our foremothers and forefathers, including my own. And I believe we should be adjudicating asylum cases in countries of origin. I believe we should be investing in the countries to keep people safe, provide economic opportunity. We would spend a whole lot less and save a whole lot more, both in money and human lives. And yes, we should be employing the most extraordinary 21st century technologies. In some cases, it's barriers. We should listen to the professionals and not politicize the issue. I've gone to 2 trips I've taken to the southern border. It is appalling. It is appalling. It's a failure of many administrations over many years. We can do better. There are other areas that I try to do better. We should have zero-based budgeting. So instead of just throwing more money every year after solutions that may not working. Start from scratch. Identify our priorities that are most important to Americans. Resource them appropriately. We don't have a healthcare system in America. We have a sick care system. We have no mental health provision in this country. And if you can find it, you can't pay for it. It's too expensive. We don't have a child care solution right now. We're one of the only developed countries in the entire world that doesn't. I'm listening to people. I'm hearing this every day. America is not affordable. And if these do not become the priorities of the next administration, as they will under mine, then we're in trouble. And that's where we have to refocus our efforts. This is not running against the president. It is running for the future. A lot of what he has done is exceptional. I voted for it. I helped market it. I'm going to do better by listening and identifying how we're going to pursue the future in a much more unified, effective way than we have in the past. And I know people are ready for it.
I basically hear you saying you're going to build on a lot of what President Biden has done. Are you basically running as a younger version of Joe Biden?
Well, people can determine that on their own. I am younger. I have different ideas. I have a different life experience. I've not spent 50 years in Washington. I think that is actually part of the problem. That's why I believe in term limits. I think we should have a rotation of public service in our country. We have a crisis of participation. You can see how it's affecting even primaries. Instead of encouraging people to actually run, we're trying to disincentivize them from doing so. We need young people to participate in public service. And to do so, we've got to change this entire culture. I believe deeply in the policies that the Biden administration has passed. I will do it differently in some cases. I will listen to ideas that are not being considered right now. And that's what the whole proposition is, Kristen, is to reform this system that has denied opportunity to too many people, has afforded great opportunity and privilege to the well-connected, to our corporations. And let me just give you an example. Why do we afford corporations and the well-connected better tax advantages than we do to hardworking people? Why do we make it childcare so unaffordable so it actually keeps people in the homes instead of going out to work? Why do we not invest in a mental health care system that is world-class to make sure our young people are healthy, to make sure people of all ages have good emotional health, and most importantly, perhaps, to reduce the incidence of violence that we are seeing taking lives all around the country, diseases of despair, overdoses, gun violence, 18 people killed in Maine just this week. If people think everything is going just great right now and we should keep on keeping on, I respect you, but I disagree with you, and I'm offering a different way forward, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait to get to work.
Former Congressman Phillips, big picture here. You voted to impeach former President Trump twice. After January 6th, you posted, quote, "History will judge every one of us in a position to end this nightmare." So how do you justify your presidential run, which could effectively help Mr. Trump get back into the Oval Office?
Kristen, that conventional wisdom, perhaps, of a primary to a sitting president will help the alternative is nonsensical to me. I believe, and I think the data supports, as do conversations and listening to people, that the most dangerous path right now is the status quo. I sadly believe that President Biden is perhaps one of the only Democrats who might lose to Donald Trump. And I will tell you, in 2016, I watched the election with my family. I had a wonderful life, never contemplated serving in office. Woke up the next morning, my daughters were in tears, and I sat at the breakfast table and I promised them that I would do something, and I did. Ran for Congress. I flipped a district blue that had been in Republican hands for 60 years. I love my service. I made a promise to them. I was in the House chamber on January 6th, one of the most atrocious days in American history, when an insurrection that was inspired by a sitting president of the United States affected our entire country. And I will not sit down. I will not be quiet. I will not get back in line the way that a lot of my colleagues would like right now, because I see the danger ahead, and it is this political system, this industrial complex, if you will, that is preventing the very need we have right now. And that's why I entered this race, because it is about our children, it is about the future. And right now, if this election was held today, President Biden would lose. And it is an existential threat to the future of the United States of America that will not happen under my watch. And when I'm president, I will bring this country together, not just in words, but in deeds. That's what people are begging for, they're asking for, and I invite Republicans, followers of Trump, followers of Joe Biden, to come meet me, hear me out, most importantly, let me listen. There's a better way forward, and it is time for change.
I want to ask you about some of what your fellow Democratic lawmakers have said about your presidential bid. Senator Pete Welch said, quote, "It's a distraction, and he's going to be hounding on the president, not because of policies. It's not helpful. It just doesn't make sense," says Senator Elizabeth Warren. One other thing is true of Minnesota. We love Joe Biden, and we're working day in and day out to get him reelected. Your colleagues are not in favor of your presidential bid. So how do you garner support from your fellow Democrats in this race, Congressman?
I'm so glad you asked me that question, Kristen, because therein lies the great problem in this country. The people whose job it is to represent the Americans, the American people, the American citizens, are not doing it. They're not listening, because if you go out and listen to people in the streets, in restaurants and coffee shops, at their places of work, in parks, they're telling every one of us right now that they want change. So when I hear people in Washington say that this is a mistake or this is nuts, that is exactly the evidence that everybody needs watching right now, that something is terribly wrong. We are the exhausted majority of this nonsense, people who are so much more focused on preserving and protecting their power than they are protecting American people. That is the truth. I hear it every day. My colleagues hear it every day. I know you hear it every day too, Kristen. And that's why I'm running. Because in a democracy, when people are asking for change, you stand up, you participate, you don't sit down and shush up. That is the worst we could possibly do for the future of this country. And I will not rest, but I will be respectful. I will not demean the president. I will not undermine him. I will not be dangerous relative to his chances. And whoever the Democratic nominee is, I believe it will be me. But if it is someone else, I promise to do everything I can, every ounce of energy, every moment of my day, to ensure that he or she is elected, because that's how important it is right now.
Congressman, you are there in New Hampshire right now, actively campaigning, but it's a state that by all accounts won't award delegates. You missed the Nevada filing deadline. It doesn't seem like your campaign is being built to actually win the nomination. Do you have a realistic path? What is it?
Oh, rest assured, this is a campaign built to win. The difference is that most people who run for president have spent decades preparing for it personally, building organizations, planting the seeds, protecting their positions of power. This is a campaign that was developed in the last 3 weeks because there is an existential threat to the country. President Biden is behind in the national polls. He is behind in 5 of the 6 battleground state polls. His approval ratings are at historic lows. And I hear every day from people right here in New Hampshire and Minnesota, all around the country, the same thing. People want change.
But
that is the truth.
Congressman, let me just challenge you.
I think we should simply acknowledge that.
Let me just challenge you on that point, because if you can't win delegates in New Hampshire, where you're currently campaigning, you will be behind in the delegate count. Will you not? You're not registered in Nevada. What's the path here, and at what point do you say, okay, I don't have enough delegates, I'm going to drop out and get behind President Biden?
I believe we will win New Hampshire. I will be filing in other states. We are building a grassroots campaign.
What other states,
in the most literal sense.
Where else are you filing?
I'll be in South Carolina. I'll be in Michigan. I'll be in other states all around the country, because that's how you do this. You stand before the voters to make your case, to listen to them, to hear them, their hopes and their dreams, their fears, and then to identify how we are going to work together to overcome those challenges. It's so fundamental to democracy. I do not understand why people are fearful about choice. Why are people fearful about the freedom to have different options? It makes almost no sense to me. And that, I think, is part of the problem that we're seeing in the country. That's why people are so angry, they're so upset, and that's why 80% of the country wants a different person in the White House. And that is just the facts. And I'm going to run a spirited campaign. We're starting today. It's going to build every day. It's going to be joyful. We have youth coming along. We're going to be at high schools and colleges. We are going to be extraordinarily optimistic. And we're also going to be very serious, because we are facing extraordinary threats around the world, and we're facing existential threats right here at home as it relates to the 2024 election. I would not be doing this, and I would not have encouraged anybody else to be doing this unless the sitting president was going to lose the next election. And that's why I'm doing it. That's why somebody should be doing it, and that's why I still invite others to do it, because it is that important to our country and to our future. And if you have a difference of opinion about it, I still respect you, but I believe you're wrong.
Well, you take me to my next question. In August, you told my colleague Chuck Todd that you wanted a moderate governor from the heartland to challenge President Biden. Do you think there should be a moderate governor in this race, or do you see yourself as the strongest candidate? Have you shifted your perspective on that?
I had tried for a year to encourage the president to pass the torch. I had spent a better part of a year encouraging and asking other candidates to participate. They all seemed to want to wait to 2028 because they didn't want to risk their own careers. Instead, we're now risking the United States of America. And I think it's really important to note, thank goodness we live in a country where somebody like me, and frankly anybody who's 35 years old, born in this country, can come to this very state and do what I just did. And by the way, there are 15 other people that are going to be on the ballot as Democrats right here because they recognize it too. You don't know their names probably, and you may not, but those are wonderful Americans because they see what is at risk as well. And I want to encourage participation. Our country needs it. We are in crisis. We have great challenges. And all this conversation about what happens in Washington is the whole problem. We're not listening to people who are screaming for change for so many reasons, starting with affordability. I know how to get it done. I'm going to do it in a thoughtful and optimistic and joyful manner and in a very serious manner. I know how to do it, and I'm going to bring great people along, no matter their politics, only based on their principle, because we cannot beat each other. We cannot beat each other. We've got to work together, and that, perhaps, is the most important element of this next election. Someone who will not just talk that, but will walk that.
Congressman, right now, as you know, there is a war in Israel. There's a war in Ukraine. The country is staring down another potential government shutdown. Would a President Phillips be doing anything different than a President Biden, particularly on the world stage right now?
Well, let me talk about the world stage. I lost my father in the Vietnam War when I was 6 months old. He was afforded education because he grew up with no money, lost my grandfather, his father, when he was just a kid, was afforded an ROTC scholarship to go to college. He was sent to Vietnam to fight for our freedom, and he was killed. I understand the consequences of sending our young men and women overseas. I'm a Gold Star son. I spend a lot of time with Gold Star children to this very day. I know the consequences and the great power of the American presidency, how we can use it for good, and how in the past we have not. Yes, that would change in some ways under my leadership, and I think it should. I give credit to the Biden administration. I think they're handling Ukraine and Israel with great effectiveness. And I'm not here to talk about anything that they're doing wrong, especially during a crisis. I am disgusted by other candidates who would take the time right now, while there are these wars overseas, to demean the President of the United States. That is not the time. This is when we should unify. And domestically, I just shared with you some ways I would do things differently. By the way, we don't have health care. We have sick care. We need to comprehensively reform health in America because it is consuming 20% of our GDP. We're $33 trillion in debt, spending $600 billion in debt service, which is paying for the past, not paying for the future. We've got to manage our government differently. I will do so in ways that Americans would make us proud again of their government, to restore faith in government, to encourage young people to participate and unify. Because if we don't, everything happening overseas, everything happening domestically will be the end of us. That's how important this election is. And if I felt the president was going to win the next election, if 80% of the country didn't agree, I wouldn't be doing this. Someone has to. But I'm honored to. I'm excited to. And I will get it done, I promise. Congressman,
respectfully, if you're not willing to draw bright red lines with the president, how are you going to beat him in this primary?
How am I going to win this? Very simply. American voters. What a novel, unusual concept. Is it the political industrial complex that will decide this next election? Is it the Democratic National Committee that will decide the next election? Yeah, that's how it's been done in the past, and that's exactly why we find ourselves in this very position. I was an outsider for most of my life. I watched this from the outside. I was disgusted, just like so many watching right now. Then I've spent the last 5 years on the inside, every single day paying attention to how this works, how it doesn't work, what needs to change. That's my case to America. If people are willing to take a moment out of their day and go vote in the primary election, I can almost guarantee you that I will win the Democratic nomination, and then I will win the U.S. presidency. And then, once again, the American people will come first, because it was they that will have made the difference, not the political industrial complex that is going to be working very hard against me because I was not a member of that tribe.
Congressman, very quickly before I let you go, do you commit to releasing your tax returns, and when can voters expect to see them?
Absolutely. I believe in transparency. All of my assets are in a blind trust. I don't believe there should be congressional stock trading. I also want to let you know I'm the only member of Congress out of 535 people that accepts no PAC money. I accept no lobbyist money. I do not give money to my fellow members of Congress, nor do I receive it. And I don't have a leadership PAC. That makes me the one of 535. And in my presidential campaign, I will not accept PAC money. I will not accept lobbyist money. And I will not accept money from members of Congress, because this is an unmitigated disaster. It is legalized corruption, and I will tackle it. I will raise the ethical bar both in Congress and in the Supreme Court for every member of the administration and around the country, because we have got to do better. That is the point. I can't wait to meet people. I can't wait to listen. I can't wait to make my case. And if people want to come out and vote, and they want to see the change that they're talking about every day to me, please do. It's an invitation, because we're going to do better, and I really can't wait to get to work. It's that important.
All right, Congressman Dean Phillips, thank you so very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.